He thought no woman would want a man with kids. She said, "You're wrong about that." John had always believed in the simple joys of life, waking up early to the sound of birds, feeling the first rays of sunlight spill into his living room, and hearing the laughter of his children fill the house. But life, as he often reminded himself, was never simple. He had become a single father 2 years ago after his marriage ended in a quiet and painful way. The divorce had not been dramatic or loud. It had been the slow drifting apart that sometimes happens when two people grow in different directions. Yet, despite the calmness of its ending, it had left John feeling alone and unsure of himself, especially in matters of the heart. Raising 2 children on his own was both a joy and a challenge. His daughter, Lily, was 8 years old, bright and curious, always asking questions about the world that sometimes left John scrambling for answers. His son, Max, was 5, full of energy, laughter, and the kind of mischief that could turn a quiet evening into a whirlwind of chaos. John loved them more than anything, their small hands holding his, their smiles when he came home from work, their sleepy hugs before bedtime. These were the moments he cherished most. But he also knew that being a single father meant carrying a heavy responsibility, and that responsibility often made him question his place in the world outside of his family. John had always been careful with his feelings. Even before the divorce, he had been a thoughtful and protective partner, sometimes too cautious, always trying to do what was right. But now, as a single dad, the weight of decisions fell squarely on his shoulders. There were doctor's appointments to schedule, school events to attend, and countless small emergencies that seemed to arise every week. Beyond the logistics, there was the constant emotional care his children needed. Listening to Lily talk about her friends, calming Max after a nightmare, making sure they felt loved and secure. John did all of it willingly, but sometimes he felt invisible as a person outside his role as a father. He often thought about dating, but the idea seemed overwhelming. The few times he had tried to meet someone new after his divorce, he found himself hesitating. The truth was, he was afraid. Afraid that women would see his children as a burden. Afraid that they would judge him for having responsibilities they didn't have. He had heard friends say things like, "It's complicated dating someone with kids," and though they meant well, the words had left a mark. John started to believe that maybe he was meant to be alone, not because he wanted to be, but because his life was too full, too complicated for someone else to join. Even simple things like going to a coffee shop or a bookstore felt tinged with hesitation. He would see couples laughing together and feel a pang of longing, quickly followed by a tightening in his chest. He would wonder if a woman like that could ever see him as more than just a man with children, a man whose life was busy and unpredictable.
Dating apps only amplified these feelings. Every profile he looked at seemed to remind him of his own fears.
The conversations were polite, sometimes flirtatious, but he always hesitated when it came to mentioning his kids. And when he didn't mention them, the truth always lingered like a shadow, making him feel dishonest. Work was no easier. John had a stable job in an office, and while it provided for his family, it didn't fill the emptiness he sometimes felt in his personal life. He would spend long hours at his desk, glancing at photos of Lily and Max on his computer, feeling proud of how they were growing, but also painfully aware that his own dreams of companionship were on hold. He longed for someone who could understand the chaos and the joy of raising children, someone who could love not just him, but the life he had built with his kids. Yet every time he considered opening up to someone, he hesitated, convincing himself that no one would truly want a life so intertwined with little hands, school projects, and bedtime stories. John's friends often tried to encourage him, reminding him that there were women out there who would appreciate his dedication as a father. They would say things like, "You have so much love to give, John. Someone will see that." But their words, though well-meaning, did little to quiet the doubts in his own mind. He had grown so used to thinking of himself as a man whose heart was already taken by his children that he didn't know how to imagine it could belong to someone else too. Even at home, the fear lingered. Sometimes after tucking the kids into bed, he would sit alone on the couch, staring at the quiet rooms, and imagine what it would be like to share his life with someone new. Would they accept the messiness of his days? The constant interruptions, the sticky hands, the homework, the tantrums, the laughter, the midnight coughs? Could they see that behind all the chaos there was a man who loved deeply, who had patience he didn't know he possessed, and who had a heart big enough for more than one kind of love? It wasn't just about fear of rejection. John also worried about protecting his children. He wanted them to feel secure, to know that whoever entered their lives would be trustworthy, patient, and kind. He couldn't imagine introducing someone who might hurt them or make them feel like they weren't enough. So, in a way, his hesitation was an act of care, even if it left him lonely. Friends sometimes asked why he didn't try harder to meet someone new, but John could only smile and say, "I'm waiting for the right person." In truth, he wasn't sure he knew what that meant anymore. The right person felt like a distant dream, a story in a book rather than a possibility in his life. Yet, he never stopped hoping, even if that hope was quiet and tucked away behind the routines of daily life. John's days were a delicate balance between responsibility and longing. Mornings were filled with breakfast chaos and school runs, afternoons with work, and evenings with homework and bedtime stories. On weekends, he tried to carve out time for himself, but even then, thoughts of companionship crept in. He would watch families at the park, couples walking hand in hand, and imagine what it would be like to have someone share the joy of his children's laughter, the warmth of their hugs, and the quiet moments after lights out. Despite the loneliness, John never gave up on being a father. That love was steadfast, unwavering, and it had become the center of his life. But alongside that love, there was a quiet, unspoken wish, a wish that someday someone would see him not just as a father, but as a man who could love and be loved in return. A man who had room in his heart for someone else without taking away from the love he had for his children. He didn't know when it would happen, or even if it would happen at all. But in those quiet moments, when the house was still and the children were asleep, John allowed himself to imagine it. Laughter shared with someone new, small gestures of care, the warmth of connection that went beyond friendship. He imagined a life where love didn't have to be divided, where his children were welcomed as part of the journey rather than seen as an obstacle. And in that imagination, he found a flicker of hope. A hope that one day he might hear someone say the words he had longed to hear, "I love you, and your children are part of that too." For now, John continued his life with patience and quiet courage. Every spilled cereal bowl, every bedtime story, every scraped knee, every joyful laugh was part of the world he had created for his children. And while he carried the fear of rejection and the doubts about the future, he also carried a resilience and a capacity for love that he had not fully realized until he became a father. That resilience would sustain him, he hoped, until the day someone came along who could see the whole of him. The man, the father, and the heart that had room to love again. And so, John's story continued. One busy, chaotic, beautiful day at a time, waiting quietly for the unexpected, ready for the moment when hope might meet reality, and a life full of love could begin once again. John had always loved the quiet corners of the local bookstore. There was something comforting about the smell of new books mingled with the faint scent of coffee, the way the light fell softly on the shelves, and the hushed whispers of people lost in their own worlds. On this particular rainy afternoon, the streets outside were slick with water, and the gentle patter of raindrops against the windows created a calm rhythm. John had decided to take a break from the chaos of his home life, thinking a few hours in the bookstore might give him the quiet he rarely experienced anymore. He wandered through the aisles, running his fingers along the spines of novels, occasionally pulling one out to glance at the cover. He loved fiction, especially stories about ordinary people navigating life's challenges. It reminded him that struggles were universal, and sometimes the simplest moments carried the greatest meaning. John had been so absorbed in a book about a father raising his children after a loss that he didn't notice anyone approaching until a soft voice startled him. "I'm so sorry," the woman exclaimed, her eyes wide and apologetic. Coffee had spilled from the cup she was holding, dripping onto the floor and onto the edge of a book. John instinctively stepped back, but it was too late. The coffee had left a small stain on the corner of the book he had just picked up. "No worries," John said quickly, crouching slightly to blot the wet spot with a paper towel from the counter. "It's just a book." The woman smiled, a little embarrassed, and held out her hand.
"I'm Emily," she said. "I didn't see you there."
It was completely my fault. John shook her hand, noticing how warm and genuine her smile was.
"John," he replied, "and it's okay. Accidents happen." They both laughed softly, the tension breaking instantly. John felt a flicker of something he hadn't felt in a long time. a spark of connection, simple and unexpected. They began to talk about the book that had been damaged, and the conversation quickly grew to other topics. Books, music, favorite movies, and life in general flowed naturally between them. It was the kind of conversation that didn't feel forced or awkward, where each word seemed to fit into a rhythm both understood. As they spoke, John felt himself relaxing in a way he hadn't in years. Emily had a way of listening that made him feel seen, really seen, beyond the surface. Her questions were thoughtful, her laughter easy, and her energy genuine. Yet beneath the warmth, a familiar worry began to creep in. He knew he had to tell her about his children eventually, but he also feared how she might react. Would she be put off by the fact that his life was so tied to his kids? Would she see his love for them as a complication rather than a strength? When the conversation shifted naturally to family, John hesitated. Emily noticed the pause. "Do you have kids?" she asked gently, sensing his reluctance. John took a deep breath, deciding honesty was better than concealment. "Yes, I have two," he admitted, his voice quiet but steady. "A daughter and a son." "There, my world!" For a brief moment he expected a flicker of doubt or discomfort. Instead, Emily smiled softly, her eyes kind and understanding. "You're wrong about that," she said, almost as if reading his thoughts. "Having kids doesn't make you any less worthy of love. If anything, it shows how much love you already have to give." John blinked, surprised by her words. They weren't judgmental or patronizing. They were simple, honest, and filled with warmth. For the first time in a long time, he felt a weight lift off his chest. Someone was seeing him, all of him. The man who was a father, the man who carried responsibility, the man who still had room in his heart for love. Over the next few hours, John and Emily continued to talk. Rain drummed softly against the windows, but inside the bookstore, a small bubble of connection had formed. They shared stories of their lives, their challenges, and their dreams. Emily spoke of her work in a local nonprofit, helping children and families, which immediately sparked John's admiration. She had a gentle strength about her, the kind that didn't demand attention but naturally drew people in. John found himself laughing more than he had in months. He shared small anecdotes about Lily and Max, the funny things they said, the little adventures they had in the backyard, the nightly rituals he cherished. Emily listened intently, her eyes lighting up with each story. She asked questions that showed genuine interest, not just polite curiosity. With every detail he shared, John realized that his fear of judgment was slowly dissolving. Here was someone who didn't see his children as a burden, but as an essential part of who he was. Before they realized it, the bookstore was about to close. The rain had eased into a gentle drizzle, and the streets outside reflected the soft glow of the city lights. Emily glanced at her watch. "I should probably head home," she said reluctantly. "But I'd like to see you again, if that's okay." John smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "I'd like that," he said. They exchanged numbers and said their goodbyes, each walking out into the rainy evening with a sense of anticipation and hope that John hadn't felt in a long time. As he drove home, he thought about the encounter, replaying Emily's smile and her words. "You're wrong about that. It wasn't just about his children, it was about him. About the possibility that someone could see his life and still want to be part of it." The following days were filled with a quiet excitement. John found himself checking his phone more often, looking forward to messages from Emily. The conversations grew naturally, from brief texts to longer calls where they shared thoughts about their day, funny moments, and little dreams for the future. John was careful not to overwhelm his children with the news, but he wanted them to feel the change in him. He realized that opening his heart didn't mean leaving them behind. It meant inviting someone new into a life that was already full of love. One weekend, Emily suggested meeting again, this time at a local park. John hesitated, thinking about how Lily and Max might react. But he also knew that the children's reactions would be guided by his own attitude. So he decided to bring them along, nervous but hopeful. The moment Emily arrived, she knelt down to greet the kids, her smile warm and genuine. She asked their names, played a little game with Max, and listened patiently as Lily told her about a school project she was proud of. John watched from a distance, amazed at how naturally Emily interacted with his children. There was no awkwardness, no forced effort, just genuine care and connection. As the afternoon unfolded, John realized that Emily's presence didn't take away from his role as a father, it added to it. She didn't try to replace him or assume control. She simply shared in the joy of his children, laughed with them, and respected the boundaries of their family. John felt a relief he hadn't expected. The fear of judgment, the worry that his life was too complicated, began to fade. By the end of the day, as they walked back home in the fading sunlight, John felt a new kind of hope blossoming in his chest. Emily had not only accepted him, but also embraced the life he had built. She had shown him that love didn't have to come at the expense of responsibility. It could grow alongside it. That evening, as John tucked Lily and Max into bed, he shared a little of the day's events, careful not to overwhelm them with expectations. They laughed about the silly games Emily had played with Max, and Lily talked about how nice Emily seemed. John smiled quietly to himself, realizing that this could be the beginning of something meaningful, a love that didn't ignore his children but welcomed them as part of the journey. For the first time in a long while, John allowed himself to imagine a future where love didn't have to be separate from responsibility, where he could be a devoted father and still have a partner by his side. Where laughter, care, and shared moments created a life richer than he had dared to hope for. As he lay in bed that night, John reflected on the strange and wonderful way life had a habit of surprising people. He had gone to the bookstore seeking a quiet escape, but he had found something far more valuable. A person who saw him, truly saw him, and didn't shy away from the love he had for his children. It was a small moment in the grand story of his life, but it felt monumental. And in that quiet night, listening to the soft breathing of Lily and Max from their rooms, John felt a gentle hope he hadn't known he needed. Perhaps, he thought, love was not about perfection or having an empty life. Perhaps it was about finding someone who could walk beside you in all the messiness, all the chaos, all the laughter, and all the love that life already offered. And for the first time in years, John believed that someone like that could be Emily. After that first rainy afternoon at the bookstore, John found himself thinking about Emily more often than he expected. Her words, "You're wrong about that," kept echoing in his mind. They weren't just about him, they were about his children, about the life he had built, and about the possibility of sharing it with someone who could understand and accept all of it. For the first time in years, John felt a cautious hope stirring in his heart. Over the next few weeks, John and Emily continued to spend time together. Their meetings were never forced or hurried. Each one felt natural and easy. Sometimes they went for walks in the park, letting Max and Lily run ahead with carefree laughter. Other times they met at small cafes, talking over steaming cups of coffee about everything from books to dreams for the future. John noticed that Emily had a gentle patience about her. She didn't rush him, didn't demand anything he wasn't ready to give. Instead, she listened, asked thoughtful questions, and shared pieces of herself in return. John began to see how easy it could be to be with someone who truly cared, not just about him, but about the life he was already living. Emily asked about his children naturally, showing genuine curiosity rather than polite interest. She remembered little details: Lily's love for drawing, Max's obsession with dinosaurs, the way Lily insisted on setting the table perfectly for dinner. These small acts of attention made John feel both seen and understood. It was something he hadn't realized he needed so deeply. One Saturday morning, Emily invited John and the kids to her apartment for a simple breakfast. She cooked pancakes and scrambled eggs, and Max immediately declared them the best pancakes ever. Lily helped set the table, carefully placing the napkins and utensils, while Emily chatted with them, laughing at their jokes and stories. John watched from the kitchen doorway, feeling a mix of awe and relief. Here was someone who didn't shy away from the chaos of his family life, but instead embraced it. She didn't try to compete with his role as a father, she complemented it. After breakfast, they decided to go to a nearby park. Emily ran with Max, played tag with Lily, and even joined John in a game of frisbee. It wasn't forced or awkward, it was natural. Emily had a way of fitting into their lives without ever trying to take over, and John felt his worries melt away. For the first time, he saw how love could exist alongside responsibility. Emily didn't see his children as a burden. She saw them as part of the life she might share with him. That afternoon, while the children were playing near a fountain, John and Emily sat on a bench and talked quietly. He opened up about his fears, how he had worried that no woman would ever accept him with his children, how he had often felt invisible outside of his role as a father. Emily listened intently, her hand lightly touching his in a gesture of support. "You're not alone in feeling that way," she said softly. "But you've been carrying these fears alone for too long." Love doesn't have to be something you're afraid of. It can be a part of your life alongside everything you already care about. And sometimes it finds you when you least expect it. John looked at her, feeling a mix of gratitude and amazement. Her words were simple, but they struck a deep chord. She wasn't just speaking to him, she was speaking to the part of him that had been hesitant for so long, the part that had been waiting quietly for someone who could understand. Over the next few weeks, Emily became a regular presence in their lives. She would come over to help with homework, listen to Lily read aloud, and play imaginative games with Max. John noticed how naturally the children responded to her. They laughed more, seemed happier, and even John himself felt lighter. Emily had a unique ability to balance being a friend, a guide, and a gentle authority when needed, all without overstepping. One evening after a particularly busy day, John sat on the couch while Emily helped the children with a craft project. He watched her patiently guide Max through a tricky puzzle, offering encouragement and celebrating small victories. Lily painted a picture and proudly showed it to Emily, who praised her creativity sincerely. John felt a surge of gratitude and admiration. This woman who had entered their lives quietly and unexpectedly was helping him carry the load he had once thought too heavy to share. It wasn't just the children who were affected by Emily's presence. John found himself opening up in ways he hadn't in years. He shared stories of his past, his hopes for the future, and even his small fears about failing as a father. Emily didn't judge him. She simply listened, sometimes offering advice, sometimes just holding space for him to speak. That kind of emotional support was something John hadn't realized he missed so deeply. One rainy evening, as the wind howled outside and the children were asleep, John and Emily sat together in the living room. The soft glow of a lamp cast warm light across the room, and they talked quietly about their day. John found himself laughing at a story Emily told about her own childhood, and she laughed at his jokes in return. It was a simple moment, but it carried a profound sense of connection. For the first time, John felt that he could imagine a future where love and family coexisted naturally. Emily's patience and understanding began to dissolve the walls John had built around his heart. He realized that love didn't have to mean losing control or giving up his responsibilities. Instead, it could mean sharing his life fully with someone who accepted all aspects of it, including the children who were his greatest joy. He no longer felt that dating someone meant risking his family's stability. He felt that it could enhance it. As the weeks turned into months, their bond deepened. They celebrated small milestones together. Max's first lost tooth, Lily's school play, a rainy afternoon spent baking cookies. Emily never sought to replace John's role as a father. She complemented it. She offered guidance when needed, joined in on the fun, and provided a sense of calm reassurance that John didn't realize he had been craving. John also began to notice changes in himself. He laughed more freely, felt less weighed down by fear, and started to imagine a life that included love without guilt or hesitation. Emily had helped him see that having children wasn't a limitation. It was a part of who he was, and the right person would embrace it. Her presence made him feel whole, as if he could finally integrate the different parts of his life without fear. One Saturday, they all decided to have a picnic in the park. Emily had prepared sandwiches and snacks, and John carried a blanket for everyone. The children ran around, chasing each other and laughing, while John and Emily sat on the blanket, enjoying the moment. John watched her interact with the kids, the way she encouraged Max to try new games, the way she listened to Lily's stories with genuine interest. He felt a profound sense of relief and joy. This wasn't just a romantic connection, it was a partnership, a shared life filled with warmth, understanding, and love. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the park. John realized something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in a long time: hope. Hope that love could exist alongside responsibility. Hope that someone could accept him fully. Hope that his family could grow not just in numbers but in happiness. He looked at Emily and saw not just a woman he cared for, but someone who had become a part of the rhythm of his life. Someone who enhanced it rather than complicated it. That night, as John tucked Lily and Max into bed, he reflected on the journey so far. He thought about how far he had come, from fearing that no woman would want him with children to seeing a future where love, family, and happiness could coexist. Emily hadn't just entered his life, she had expanded it, showing him that love wasn't a risk but a possibility. He knew the road ahead wouldn't always be easy. There would be challenges, misunderstandings, and moments of doubt. But he also knew that with Emily by his side, they could navigate it together. For the first time in a long while, John felt ready to embrace the uncertainty of the future, confident that love could be a source of strength rather than fear. And so, their lives continued, intertwined with laughter, care, and growing affection. Emily wasn't just a friend or a partner. She was becoming a trusted presence in every part of John's life, from the small daily routines to the moments that truly mattered. She had shown him that love didn't mean leaving his children behind. It meant including them, embracing them, and building something beautiful together.
For John, this realization was transformative.
He had spent so long thinking that his life was too complicated, too full, too already spoken for to allow someone else in. But Emily had shown him that the right person didn't just accept his children. They loved them. And in loving his children, they loved him even more. By the time the week ended, John knew that his life had changed in ways he could hardly have imagined. Emily wasn't just a temporary presence. She was becoming a permanent part of his story. And for the first time, he felt that the fears he had carried for so long, fear of rejection, fear of inadequacy, fear of loving and being loved, were beginning to fade. They were being replaced by something far more powerful: trust, connection, and the promise of a shared life filled with joy. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, John noticed a shift in his life that he had never dared to hope for. Emily was no longer just someone who visited occasionally or shared quiet moments at the park. She had become part of the rhythm of his household. Her laughter echoed in the hallways, her voice blended naturally with the children's, and her presence brought a calm and warmth that John had thought was only possible in books. Every small moment with her felt like a gift, a confirmation that love could exist even in a life already full of responsibility. John's children had come to love Emily in a way that was both comforting and exciting. Lily would rush to show her drawings, eager for Emily's opinion, while Max insisted that she play his favorite games again and again. Emily's patience and joy had a ripple effect on their daily lives. Even mundane chores became fun when she was around. They folded laundry together while laughing at Max's exaggerated folding skills, and sometimes they cooked simple meals together, with Lily proudly mixing ingredients and Emily guiding her gently. John watched all of this unfold and realized that Emily had seamlessly become a trusted presence in their family life, not as an outsider, but as someone who belonged. One bright Saturday morning, John decided to take the family on a little adventure. They packed a picnic, brought blankets, and headed to a quiet lakeside spot. Emily had planned small games for the kids, like a scavenger hunt for leaves and stones, while John carried the basket filled with sandwiches and fruit. As the children ran ahead, Emily and John walked slowly along the shore, the gentle sound of water lapping at the edge of the lake creating a serene backdrop. "I'm really glad you're here," John said quietly, glancing at her. "Not just for me, but for them! They really like you, Emily!" "And I like what I see between you and them." Emily smiled softly, her eyes reflecting the sunlight. "I like being here, John. I like being part of your lives. They're amazing kids, and you're an incredible father. I don't see them as a burden. I see them as part of the person I care about." Her words struck John deeply. For years, he had carried the fear that his children made him unlovable in the eyes of anyone outside his family. But Emily had not only accepted that part of his life, she had embraced it. In her presence, he felt lighter, freer, and more open to the idea that love was possible without compromising the life he had built. They spent the day playing by the lake, building small sandcastles, skipping stones, and watching the children chase each other in pure delight. Emily's laughter blended with theirs, creating a harmony of joy that John hadn't realized he had missed so much. In these moments, he saw clearly that love wasn't something separate from life. It was life itself, made richer by the people who cared and the bonds they formed. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they gathered the children on the blanket for a small picnic dinner. John watched Emily help Max with his sandwich, carefully cutting it into small pieces, and Lily eagerly sharing her juice with her favorite doll. Emily's attention to the children was gentle and natural, never overbearing, never forced. She had a way of making them feel seen and important, and in doing so, she made John feel hopeful and secure. After they packed up and walked back to the car, John felt a new kind of certainty building inside him. Emily had not just become a part of their lives, she had become indispensable. He realized that the life he had once thought too full, too complicated, and too already spoken for could now be shared with someone he trusted and loved. And more importantly, that sharing didn't diminish his role as a father. It enhanced it. Back at home, the evening settled into a familiar rhythm. Emily helped the children get ready for bed, reading stories and tucking them in with warmth and care. John watched from the doorway, a quiet smile on his face. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine the future, a future where love, responsibility, and family could coexist harmoniously. A future where laughter, care, and mutual respect created a life fuller than he had ever dared to hope for. After the children were asleep, John and Emily sat together in the living room, sipping tea and talking quietly. They spoke about their day, about small joys and challenges, and about the slow but steady building of a life together. Emily didn't push for declarations or commitments. She simply shared her thoughts, her laughter, and her presence. And John felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for her love, but for the way she had made it possible for him to open his heart again. "I used to think love wasn't meant for people like me," John admitted softly, staring into his tea. "I thought having kids meant I had no space for someone else. But you've shown me it's not true. Love doesn't take away. It adds. You add to my life, Emily, and to theirs." Emily reached out, taking his hand in hers. "John, you've already created a beautiful life. I didn't come to replace anything. I came to join it. And seeing you with your children, seeing your heart, only makes me care for you more. Love isn't about empty lives. It's about full hearts." Her words brought tears to John's eyes, tears of relief, gratitude, and the quiet joy of being understood. For so long he had feared rejection, feared inadequacy, feared the idea that his responsibilities made him unlovable. But Emily had shown him otherwise. She had not only accepted him and his children, but had embraced the life they shared, offering love and connection that strengthened all of them. The following weeks continued in a pattern of joy, laughter, and gentle discovery. Emily became more involved in school events, helping Lily with art projects and attending Max's little performances. John noticed how naturally the children included her in their lives, seeking her opinions, sharing their small victories, and even asking for comfort during the occasional scraped knee or upset moment. Emily responded with patience and care, never trying to overstep but always being present. John's confidence as a father and as a partner grew with each passing day. He realized that having someone like Emily didn't make him less important in his children's lives. It made his life richer. He began to see the beauty of a life shared. A life where love could grow without fear, where challenges could be faced together, and where the laughter of children blended seamlessly with the warmth of adult companionship. One weekend, they decided to host a small picnic for family and close friends. John's children helped prepare snacks, and Emily guided them with encouragement and patience. As they welcomed friends, laughter and stories filled the air. John looked around and realized that this life, the one he had once thought too complicated for love, was exactly the life he had always wanted. It was messy, full of joy, full of responsibility, and now full of love. That night after the picnic, John sat quietly on the porch, Emily beside him, watching the stars appear one by one. He felt a calm contentment he hadn't known in years. His heart was full, not just with love for his children, but with hope and certainty about the life they were building together. He knew challenges would come, but he also knew that with Emily by his side, they could face anything. In that moment, John understood a profound truth. Love doesn't diminish responsibility. It doesn't ignore the past or the complexities of life. Instead, it enhances it, making every shared laugh, every shared struggle, and every small moment even more meaningful. Emily had become more than a partner. She had become a part of their family, a source of joy, comfort, and unwavering support. John smiled, feeling gratitude swell in his chest. He had once believed that no woman could love him with children. Now he knew the truth. The right person doesn't see children as a burden. They see them as part of the man they love, part of the story they want to share, part of the joy that life has to offer. And Emily had proven that to him in the most beautiful, natural way. As he walked back inside to check on the children, John felt a quiet certainty settle in his heart. Their family was growing, not in numbers alone, but in love, trust, and connection. And for the first time in a long while, he knew that the future wasn't something to fear. It was something to look forward to, filled with laughter, care, and a love that could only grow stronger with time. Life, John realized, had a way of surprising people when they least expected it. Sometimes love appeared in a bookstore on a rainy afternoon. Sometimes it entered slowly, through small gestures, shared moments, and the quiet strength of someone who truly cared. And sometimes it transformed not just the heart of one person, but the hearts of an entire family. And in that transformation, John understood that he had been wrong to doubt the possibility of love. He had been wrong to fear that no woman could want a man with children, because Emily didn't just want him. She wanted the life he had built, the family he cherished, and the love he carried in his heart. And together they would continue building a life filled with laughter, hope, and love, proving that fear and doubt could never outweigh the joy of finding the right person at the right time.